Welcome to the Coach Doctor podcast, a podcast where we discuss aspects of sports coaching from grassroots to grandstands. I'm your host, James Barkell, and on this podcast we hear from academics who research coaching, we talk to coaches on the front line from development levels through to professional coaches, and we discuss other elements of successful sporting programs with experts and practitioners from a range of sports science fields, motivational psychology, strength and conditioning, and many other elements required for successful performance. If you'd like to know more about what we do at The Coach Doctor, you can visit our website, thecoachdoctor.com.au, and learn more about our services, or follow me on Instagram at thecoachdr or Twitter at James_Barkell for more regular information. In today's episode of the Coach Doctor podcast, I'm talking to Damian McGrath. Damian has been coaching professionally since 1990, starting his career coaching Rugby League in the UK, and then making the switch to Rugby Union in the early 2000s, after taking on a skills coaching role with the Leicester Tigers. Since then, Damian has etched his mark in the modified form of rugby as a 7 specialist coach. He took England to the Commonwealth Games and the World Cup, prior to stints with Spain, Manu Samoa, Canada, Germany, and then Kenya. In addition to this, Damian is the author of 4 coaching books. He is known as an empowerment engineer. He focuses on building cultures where individuals feel empowered, valued, and equipped to reach their full potential. Damian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking me.
No, pleasure. Pleasure is all mine. Damian, what led you into coaching as a career?
Well, I trained to be a teacher, and given my age back when I played rugby league professionally, even the greats of the time had a job as well. It was very much part time. I was a teacher by day, rugby league player by night, and so I always had an interest in shaping people, albeit children at the time. But as I came to the conclusion that I'd never really achieve anything as a player, how those great players played and what they did to become better fascinated me, and I became more interested in that side of things. And I was given an opportunity to coach the reserve grade team at the club I was at as a player coach to begin with, and that started me off on that lifelong journey that made me abandon teaching and throw myself to the mercy of boards of directors around the world. But it all began just with that. What was it I didn't have as a player, and what was it other people had that just began that fascination? And obviously, being a teacher as well and trying to shape young children and help them become better was an added advantage.
A lot of the great coaches have been teachers in the past. Do you think being a teacher before being a coach is a really good introduction and sounding board for coaching?
I do, I really do. It's funny, isn't it? Because now it's seen as an advantage, but when I was a young player, there was an old saying, I suppose it shows how old-fashioned things were then, those who can do, those who can't teach, and it was almost seen as, what the teachers know, it's the real doers who are the important people. And it was almost snubbed, and yet, given what, particularly if you trained specifically to be a teacher, the background that gives you and the grounding it gives you, I just think it gives you an advantage that a lot of people who don't have that have to learn on the fly, which can set back their careers a little bit. I'm not saying it holds them back particularly, but it doesn't allow them to hit the ground running, I think, as coaches.
Yeah, interesting. Damian, you're pretty active on LinkedIn and post some excellent content. So today I'm interested in unpacking some of the posts that you've posted and some of the ones that have really resonated with me. And one of your posts discussed leveraging your personal journey to unlock your full potential. What do you mean by this?
Well, we're all unique, aren't we? And our journeys are unique. And even if we follow a similar path, we all have something that's a little bit different from others. And your journey shapes you. Your thoughts, your approach are all affected by the experiences you have. For me personally, it gave me empathy with the people I worked with. I could relate to players because I've been through a lot of what they'd been through. I understood their challenges. When they're left out of the team, it resonated with me because it happened to me a lot. So I think those experiences as a player helped me to become a better coach. It gave me an authenticity as well, that that I'd lived through lots of different things, lots of different approaches from the coaches I'd worked with, and that when I was passing on my experiences to others, they knew it wasn't from a book; it was from something I'd been through. I'm a storyteller by trade in social situations. I've always got a tale to tell, but it's amazing how the stories all come from lived experience, and I think we all have that. And too many people, storytelling is a very trendy thing to be involved in right now. If you read LinkedIn and a lot of these business posts, that everybody encourages storytelling and explain how important it is. But for most of us, particularly people in sport, everybody has some great stories to tell, and they always have a good message. So I think it creates a bond with the people you work with, and I think leveraging those stories are really important. And of course, the longer you're involved in something, the more wisdom you accrue if you're smart enough. If you make a mistake twice, then I think you've never learned, have you? So I think perspective changes with time. If you're still doing the same thing now that you were doing when you started, you haven't learned anything, and you need to get a perspective on how people approach things, how people want to do things, what affects your daily working life. And that also gives you resilience, and it helps you to inspire, because usually you've stumbled and fallen yourself, and you can use that to help strengthen others when their resolve is teetering a little bit. Resilience is another buzzword that's thrown around a lot, but we all have to be resilient, whether we're in sport or whether we're just going about our daily lives. And being resilient means you just have to understand that you're going to hit roadblocks. Not all your roads are going to be in a straight line. Sometimes you might have to go backwards or take a detour, but it doesn't mean it's the end. And it's understanding that you can overcome things. And having a coach, I think, who understands that and can pass that message on is really important. So I think for all of us, leveraging our life experience is really important. Because it paints a path that other people can see, can work for them. It doesn't always have to be, if you don't win the championship this year, it's a disaster. You can explain that, there are other ways forward.
Yeah, so you want to try and also celebrate some of the smaller victories. It's not necessarily about winning a championship. There's also the opportunity to lose a game, but you compete really well in a certain area. You can celebrate some of those as victories as well. Is that sort of where you're going with
the old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day, which means that things can take a bit longer to come to fruition. And your experiences are your most valuable asset. You can use your experiences to explain to other people that it doesn't always happen overnight. It took me 25 years to be an overnight success as a coach. I didn't have a head coach role until I was in my late 40s. So does that mean I was a failure, or that things haven't worked out? No, sometimes your journey can take you in different directions, and the path can wind in a different way. So I think using those experiences to pass it on, particularly to younger coaches as well as players, to understand that don't worry if things don't seem to click immediately. There's always a way forward, and if we make mistakes, we'll always learn from them, because that's the most valuable lesson we can have.
I think a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes probably really understand that concept and that idea that Rome wasn't built in a day, and you're trying to develop and grow over a period of time. But these days, sports become so professional. As a coach, is it important to try and sell that to the leaders that are above you, the CEOs of the clubs and the owners of the clubs and those sorts of things?
Well, you can try, but I think time is the most precious gift a coach can be given, I think, even more so than resources. But it's in short supply these days, because we live in an instant world. People want instant success, and it's almost impossible to go in and change things to such a degree in such a quick manner, because things take a little bit of time. But if you can explain it to people, and I think you need to know what it is that the people in charge want. Do they want instant success? Then maybe you have to explain to them that you're not the person for them. Or are they prepared to give you the time if you can show that there are markers on the way that we're moving forward? The one thing I've found about coaching is that, a lot of the best coaches, and I'm not saying I'm one of the best, but I try to be, put the players first, and you're very player-centered, but you care about the players. The people above them care about themselves first. They see sport as an opportunity as opposed to something for a longer term. I know it's a sweeping generalisation, but a lot of the people I've met in senior positions, they see what's happening below them as an issue that might reflect on them. So they're quick to make changes in case they're tarred with the brush of failure. So yeah, it is. It's not something I think you can ever change. You've got to try and work with the people you have, and education's a great thing for them as well. If you're prepared to explain to people and keep them in touch with what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think you have a better longer term chance than if you try and keep people out and don't allow them in, and so they can't understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, really good point. I think it's really important to educate everyone within the organisation and get as much alignment as you can to get the whole organisation sort of moving in the right direction.
The greats keep everybody involved. Everybody likes to feel that they're involved and that they understand what's going on. And the best coaches. There was a guy, I don't know if you remember the name, a great Australian called Graham Murray, who coached, the best coach I ever worked with, and as far as I'm concerned, the greatest. But he was so good with people. He's so good at keeping the whole organisation. Leeds Rhinos in England, where I was his assistant, it's a big club, a big club, as big as anything in Australia, which is saying something because the NRL is the pinnacle of rugby league. But he had the board, the staff, and I mean all the staff, the ground staff, the retail staff, the office staff. Everybody felt part of it, and he just had this way of keeping everybody involved. And so if there were ever a little stumble, there was no issue. Nobody pointed the finger at Graham, because they all felt that they were behind him because he included them. And you try and do that with your team. You want it to be inclusive for you and all your staff. But the really top people, I think of Alex Ferguson in football in England, he kept everybody involved. I think everybody felt part of what went on. If you have that gift, then I think you're a long way down the track.
So you talk about 4 key pillars of life experiences, and you've discussed them briefly when I asked you about leveraging your personal journey, but I'd like to unpack them a little bit more. Firstly, You talked about empathy and understanding. So why is it so important to learn and develop empathy as a coach?
One of the things you have to do is meet people where they are. So I'll use Samoa as an example. When I went there, you think what goes on because you've seen it from afar. You've seen the teams play. You think you know where the islands are on a map. You may have met a couple of island guys in your career, but when you get there, it's a completely different lifestyle and way of life. And if you go in with your purely Western values and your way of doing things, then you're going to come to a shuddering halt and stumble badly. And I like to think in the short term that I was there, my success was based on the fact that I got to understand the players. I understood what their daily life was like. I understood that the pressures were on them, which, as you know from the Pacific Islands, it's that family first and the way religion plays a part is so important. And if you don't get that, if you don't understand how society works, then you're never going to get anywhere. And I spent a lot of time understanding the challenges they faced. I spent a lot of time listening to them, because what I wanted was for senior players to form a key group, and be those decision makers, which is what you're used to in in normal rugby terms. But that's not how people operate in Samoa. It's hierarchical, isn't it? If you're older, you're automatically in charge, and what you say goes. There's no two-way street. So I had to understand that and understand how their minds worked and what made them comfortable and what didn't. Once you get that, their challenges become more understandable rather than me judging them based purely on my values.
When you were in Samoa, did you find it hard to appreciate that cultural difference or the cultural change, or did you embrace it and, I guess learn about it as quickly as you could and make that formulate the way that you coach the team? I don't know if I've articulated that very well.
And absolutely. So I landed at the airport and was picked up by a guy from World Rugby, and we drove into Apia, to the capital, and went straight to the, it's laughingly called the High Performance Centre. It wasn't, but we went to meet the players who were stood on this pitch. It looked like the fairground after the fair had left town. It was, I thought, oh my God, what have I come to here? There were rocks on the pitch, and they had an old beaten up ball, and everybody was in ripped t-shirts, and they said, yeah, these are the players. Now, I was expecting, 6'4" Colossus all stood there waiting, ready to go. And it's not quite like that when you get there. And I stood there and I gave them what I thought was a really inspirational little pep talk. It was just a chance for me to meet them, and then I was going back to the hotel. And not one of the players met my eye. Everybody had their head down like that. And I'd ask a question, no response. Same again, no response. And I got back to the hotel, and I'm chatting with the guys, and they said, you've got to understand that that's how life is here. That they're not encouraged to respond. It's about, you're older, you tell them, they do. They won't give you any two-way street, and they don't offer opinions because that puts their head above the parapet, and they don't want to be seen to be doing that. I thought, oh my God, how am I going to get around this? So it was almost like a charm offensive to begin with. We trained, and then we'd sit and talk on the grass. We'd sit, and I'd sit next to one of them. I'd listen in to begin with, and then you'd just ask a couple of questions and maybe have a drink of water in the changing room afterwards. And it took weeks, if not months, to start to get a two-way conversation and get family information. And I'd attend if there was a death in the family. How big their extended families are. If there was a death in the family, I would go and pay my respects. And I'm a Catholic anyway, and I went to mass every Sunday in the big cathedral there in town, and I tried to become part of what went on there and understand what went on, and even down to getting decisions. Before I left, we had a little management group, leadership group rather, and the biggest decisions they made were, what colour kit shall we play? Shall we play in the blue or the white, or is it chicken or is it avocado for the really small, insignificant things. But I gave them an opportunity to have an input without it being a major thing. And we had, they enjoyed that. They liked that type of thing. Shall we leave for the airport at 6 or shall we leave at 7? Nothing that was too major or that put them under pressure. But it took, I can't tell you how long it took just to get to that point. I explained to them that you can speak to Falaminga Seli, the captain, and Falaminga will pass on your concerns to me. And it was a time thing. It meant I had to sit and understand, put myself where they are. What's their view on life? They got paid diddly squat, and not often on time. And I had to understand that, how that resonated with their family life, because it's a very poor place, Samoa. There's the odd people, the islands in general, the ordinary people, I'm sure just live hand to mouth for lots of the time. So not being paid as little as it was important. I had to understand that. And me fighting the corner ultimately didn't help my longer term prospects in Samoa either, because of the political interference. But empathy, I think, and listening are two key skills wherever you go, because then you can pick up the nuances of daily life.
Well, that, I think you've almost answered the next question, which was about building authentic connections. You really sort of went into a lot of detail around how you spent, a lot of time sitting there listening to conversations, and then slowly, integrating yourself into conversations until it came to a point where you were going to family, funerals and functions like that. So even outside of Samoan culture, why is authentic connections so important for you or for coaching?
Well, I think you need to make people comfortable, and if they can see that you're willing to make the sacrifice to become part of their life. I'll take Germany, which if I dropped you into Heidelberg, where we were based in with the German national team, and you opened your eyes and you looked at people, you'd think you could be in Sydney or any Western, because everybody looks the same as us, and the shops are basically the same. And yet German life is much different to the UK, particularly. It's a very bureaucratic country, and things like queuing are important. I was there during COVID, and I went for my second COVID jab. We were travelling and we needed to all get jabbed. And I turned up at this big open air market where the COVID jabs were being given, and mine was 7 a.m. in the morning. So I was first cab off the rank, as it were. And I got there 10 to 7, and it was, like at the airports where you have to go through the snake when you're queuing up to the desk when it's a big flight. There was no one there, so I just I walked all the way through just to kill a bit of time. Got to the front, and there was one old man stood at the front, and he was in front of me, and we nodded morning. And behind me were two younger guys who came in, and they looked at the snake and thought, much as I suppose most people would, I'm not wasting my time going through that. They just went underneath all the way to the front. Well, this old guy kicked off. You think they'd just robbed a bank or something. He brought security out, explained the situation, and they got sent back. The place was empty. They sent these two kids back to walk through the snake, and that was just a little snapshot of how Germans operate. And you have to understand all these small things to become part of the scenery, because once you understand some of those mindsets, then it makes it much easier to get things from the players. They like everything in order, and if you don't get that, I think if you're too loose, then maybe you wouldn't have the same impact.
They like the structure. And the next thing you talk about is wisdom and insight, and developing this again through experience. Now, why is it important to develop wisdom and insight through experiences instead of reading about things in textbooks?
Well, the old Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. You can think you know what to do until things happen, and learning the lessons from the past is important. Kenya was a world. Although it was towards the end of my career, I still fell foul of not following my own insights. You have to understand what it is people want from their rugby or from what they're doing, and the corruption and we didn't get paid for something like 6 months, nearly 7 months before we had pay at one point. And nobody could have. I was lucky because obviously we had some savings, and we did get paid eventually. But for 6 months, the players had nothing, and we raised money overseas. And lots of my friends said, "You need to walk away. This is ridiculous. They're setting you up for a fall here, but you think, no, I can turn this around because I want the team to be successful." But for a lot of the senior players there, they'd been treated like this for so long. They were only bothered about themselves. They just wanted the money. They didn't care whether the team won or lost. And I should have understood that, because the signs were all there. And I'd seen it before. I didn't have a strong leadership group. The senior players weren't the type of senior players I'd dealt with in the past in other places, even in Samoa. There wasn't someone there who cracked the whip and say, "Come on, boys, this is not." It was a bunch of individuals who only wanted out of it what would benefit them and their lives based on their past experiences themselves. They had enough, and that I still kick myself now that I didn't. The signs were there, and the wisdom I'd had from other things should have told me that was going to happen. So it's important to learn the lessons from what and I think wisdom is that it's understanding your facts and how it relates to daily life.
And I guess the last one you talk about is resilience and inspiration. So how can we develop resilience in our athletes? And does this translate into inspiring them through the process?
Yeah, I think it's putting resolve in that. Sometimes when there's Michael Caine, the famous film actor, he talks about using the difficulty, and he tells a great story of when he was a young man. He stood behind the flats, this on stage, and when it's his turn, he's supposed to open a door and step in, but the two people who were in the scene before him had been throwing things at each other as part of the play, and one of them had got lodged in the door. So when he's come in, he can't get the door open to step in. And the director says, "What's going on?" He said, "I'm sorry, sir." He said, the door's stuck. He said, "If it's a comedy, fall over it. If it's a drama, then kick it and smash it." He said, "Use the difficulty to your advantage." And so Michael Caine says that he's taken that into his daily life. If there's a difficulty, he looks at how he can get an advantage from it. And I thought that was such a great story when I first heard it, and as a younger coach. So I always like to think that if you have difficulties, you can use them to your advantage. That if things have gone wrong, sometimes you can clear the decks and renew. You can change things around. You've got an excuse to change things because if you haven't got the resources, you can make people feel better about themselves just by changing the timetable and use it as an excuse to do that. So I always like to use difficulties. In Canada, we had millions of dollars wiped off the budget because the Olympic funding was pulled, and that had a massive effect on what we did. But I used Terry Fox, who's probably the great Canadian hero. I don't know if you know his story about how he lost a leg and walked across Canada on one leg to try and raise money, and he's seen as the great Canadian hero. And there's a fabulous picture of from behind of this long and winding road, and he's got one, an old prosthetic leg on, and that resolve. Look at, if Terry Fox can try and walk 5,000 miles across Canada, we can get by just because we've lost a few dollars. You can build resolve in people and use others as inspiration. So building resilience is a time thing. It's not something that happens overnight. It's that will to get better because we can get better, that nothing's fatal, and that any difficulties we'll use to take us forward.
Yeah, I really like that, using difficulties to move forward. That's a great little story there from Michael Caine. He's probably from your neck of the woods in the UK.
Yes, yeah.
So I guess another interesting aspect that you've written about is copious coaching. And I really enjoyed some of your analogies here, such as needing water for hydration, but too much water can actually be dangerous. And that applies with aspects of coaching as well. So why is overcoaching problematic?
Well, that came from, we were based at the Olympic Centre, and a sports psychologist came in and he said, "Tell me things that are good for you." He obviously did all this in German, and I got the translation after. But tell me the things that are good for you, that will help you to get better. So the kid went through the usual: water, sleep, exercise, work. And he said, "What about your social life?" "Yeah, well, social life's good. You need to have a break." And then he explained how too much of a good thing can have a negative effect. And that got me thinking about coaching, how, particularly as a young coach, you want to tell everybody everything. You want to answer all their questions. You want to solve all their problems. And that creates dependence rather than independence, which is what you want as a coach. You want to coach yourself out of a job almost. The better you are, the less input you need to have. So that was what copious coaching meant to me. You can have too much of a good thing, or you can be involved too much. And wisdom, experience teaches you that lesson, sometimes harshly, but you just need to step back a little bit and allow them to be self-reliant.
Yeah, then again, that's another one that really stuck with me, because if I go back to my first, when I started coaching at a younger age, the amount of talking and direction, and I just felt like I always needed to be doing something to be effective. But as I've gotten older and I've learned more and I've developed, I guess, more wisdom and experience, I've begun to sit back a lot more, let the athletes often work it out for themselves. And I think it's a really good point, and I really enjoyed reading that with some of those analogies, because I think it really brought that point to life. Another one, you had a really beautiful post with a really nice team photo of you and the Samoan team looking like you were just enjoying the moment. The smiles on the players' faces were unforgettable. And I think you were sort of sitting there in the middle, and it looked like you were just looking around the group, just thinking, how good is this? Why is it so important to cherish these sorts of moments as a coach and in life in general?
Well, isn't that what we do everything for, to be part of the moment? You don't do it to sit back in years to come to try and remember it. You want to enjoy it at the time. What's the point if you don't enjoy it? And the thing that pricked me into writing that was something I read about. At some point in your life, your mum picked you up and put you down for the last time, or your parents took you up to bed and tucked you in, but at some point that stopped. And I thought, wow, those are momentous times in your life. That sort of change from a child into almost an adult when you that reliance on your parents. And there are some great moments in your life that you should cherish because they'll never come back. And that got me thinking then about all the times in my journey that I'd had some amazing memories. Not the cup winning things, or that where you'd say there was success. Just those great days when everybody's happy and smiling, like that picture. When life's just sweet, and you think how it's not going to get any better than this, and which is what you do it for. And when you sat on a cold, grey, rainy morning Monday morning in England, it gives you a nice warm feeling. And I think for all of us, we're all guilty of it, particularly in this modern age where it's all mobile phone pictures of. There's another great picture, I don't know if you've seen it, of Tiger Woods winning his first ever major on the 18th, and the crowd's around the green, and everybody's looking. And then you've the split, the next picture from I think 2018 when he won his last major, and it's the same thing. The crowd's all around the 18th green, but every single person's holding a mobile phone up. They're not living not in the moment. They're taking a picture of the moment. I thought, how sad is that you're not enjoying what you're being part of something that's really special. And so I think living the moment for all of us, but no matter what you do, is important, because things will happen that will never come back and that you'll never replicate, and you want to enjoy every second. I've been so lucky on the sporting front to have been to some amazing places, and as I've got older, I've made sure I've drunk in every moment. I've walked onto. I went to the SCG and stood on the field, and you think about the history around that, and lots of other places around the world, Wembley Stadium, all those things. If I've been lucky enough to be there, I've made sure that I've drunk in every second, because I think that's what makes life worthwhile. Yeah, definitely. Some great lessons there for people. I think live in the moment and enjoy the moment. Embrace all those little things. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You also mentioned capricious coaching as being the character trait most likely to lead to failure in leadership roles. Do you want to explain why?
Yeah. Well, capricious is when you're impulsive, isn't it, and unpredictable. And a couple of times, particularly as an assistant, I came across that, and it was probably the hardest times of my coaching life. Because there are so many, it undermines so much. Spontaneity is a great thing, I think, in your social life, but in your working life, I think you need a bit more certainty, because if not, it erodes trust. You can't make any long-term plans because you don't know what's going to happen. So, I won't mention any names, but if you leave on a Wednesday evening with one thing in mind, you turn up on Thursday and things have been changed without anybody knowing, then it causes lots of issues, and I came across that far too often. As for the players, it must have been even worse, I think. But as an assistant to someone, it was very difficult. As
an assistant coach, working with a whole range of head coaches, did you find that you needed that structure and you needed to know what was going on so that you could plan and you could feel involved as part of the team?
Well, the best people, if they change things, they'll discuss it with you and the other staff. And I tried to take that lesson with me into when I took over as head coach in places. You don't help yourself. You lose the support of the people around you if you don't take them with you on the journey, explain why. And also, as an assistant, you can't back up the head coach. You can't support them fully if you don't understand why they've done it, or if they've done it at all. You turn up with 2 cups of tea and the players say, well, sorry, the coach says we're having coffee today. It makes you look a fool and as though you don't know what's going on, or you're incompetent. I know that's maybe a too simplistic analogy, but I think you need, as a leader in anything, in any organisation, be it sport, education, business, the people need to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it to get behind you and push forward. If they can't do that, they can't be with you 100%.
The next one I think we're going to talk about was you posted about quick fixes in coaching, and there are no quick fixes, but there are coaching accelerators.
Yeah.
I'd like to go through each one individually because they seem pretty straightforward, but I think they're also often overlooked aspects of coaching. So I think as a coach, we tend to know these things, but do we actually live them, and do we actually follow through with them? And I guess the first one is sort of what we were just talking about, setting clear goals. Why is it important as a coach, as a head coach, to set clear goals? And is it just for yourself as a coach? Is it for your assistants? Is it for your athletes?
The goals you set them in the first place are very short term. I'm not a goal oriented person. I mean, I wrote recently about, I'm more of a horizon person than I'd have a compass rather than a roadmap. I don't like to set longer term goals, but I think short term you need that, particularly when you go in somewhere in the first place. You need to know what we're going to be doing this week and what we're going to try and achieve this week, because you can create momentum if you can win, get some early wins. If you say we're going to get 10 passes in training and we get 10 passes that day, then there's a focus on passing and we're already doing better than we're doing before. That's maybe not a great example, but I think you need some little KPIs that help you get everybody focused and on track in the short term. And by goals, I don't mean saying, we're going to win, at the end of the first month, we're going to win all 8 games, or, in 2 months, we're going to win the championship. I'm talking about individual goals and group goals that will help move things forward, that will accelerate their development. Because the best coaches, I don't care who you are, no one can change things overnight. Even Pep Guardiola, who's until recently was the darling of the football world here in Europe, he only finished 3rd in his first season with Man City and then went on to win umpteen championships the year after. He readily admitted he had to set the groundwork to win, in the longer term. But he had short-term goals where he wanted his players to play in a certain way and do certain things. And I think whenever you go into somewhere, you can find things little short-term goals that are achievable, but will also set the standard for further down the line.
Yeah, so that's almost like setting a direction for the path towards a longer term goal.
Yeah.
Next, you talk about active listening. Why is active listening so important?
Well, I think I more or less answered that with the Samoa thing. You can only get to know the players and understand their challenges and what they're up against and how they see things if you listen to what they say. Because again, when you first go in, you want to tell people things to begin with. You want to set the scene, but really, to set the scene properly, you have to understand, the actors who are involved in it. So not listening to their complaints and their gripes as much as just getting an idea of how they see things, how they understand the game, how they understand training, how they understand life in general, I think is really important, because then you can get the best out of people if you know what makes them tick.
So again, I think you use that Samoan example really, really well. Do you find it's different when you go, like when you're coaching in England, for example, to coaching in Samoa or you've coached in Spain, Germany, Kenya, Canada? Is active listening essentially the same wherever you go, but you just sort of like modify aspects of it to understand the group that you're with? Or do you have to spend more time listening with one group as opposed to, you're in the UK, you understand the culture already, so you probably don't need to spend as much time?
No, I think people are people, aren't they, everywhere? Everyone's favourite subject, if they're on mastermind, would be themselves, because they know themselves better. And people often want to tell you, if you can get them to open up, they'll tell you that all about their life. It's amazing what once, especially in this modern world where the coffee shop experience is big. You can go for a coffee with someone and just chat, and people love to just tell you about things if you can find the key questions. To find out about their family, to find about how, where they went to school, what life was like for them a bit younger, what do they do on a daily basis, how's travel to work. You can often pick up things on how long their journey to work is and how stressful it might be for them, so that that if the people who have to travel through heavy traffic, then they're not going to be not be as relaxed as maybe the rest of us. So I think you understand what I'm saying. I think if you're willing to take the time, people will tell you what you need to know, but you need to have a little bit of patience and be prepared to do it. And I love talking to people about, and I'm nosy, I think, anyway. So to understand what their daily life is and what they aspire to. And I mean Samoa was fab, because in the end I could sit with them. It's amazing what they tell me, which where I would never have guessed they would have opened up to me, originally. They open up about so many things, and it's nice to know, and it creates a bond. Then they get that trust, because trust only comes from listening to people and understanding them. And because if you understand them, you know how to treat them in the right way, and once you treat people properly, then I think the trust grows.
Definitely. When you discuss leveraging strengths, you discuss focusing on what they're already good at. Why this rather than trying to have more of a focus on weaknesses and developing weaknesses so they become, I guess, the full spectrum athlete?
Well, I think it's human nature. We all want to be told, well done on something. And so I got this from my own, pathetic playing career, which, I tried to be somebody and I just couldn't quite get there. But I had skills, and a couple of coaches who I still, think of fondly, always encouraged me. The first thing they talked about was, the things I could do. They didn't talk about the list of things I couldn't do or didn't do very well. And it always made me feel better. It gave me some self-belief, because, I'm one of those people who play golf, and I'm already thinking about, when I put the ball down, don't hit it in the trees, rather than, I just need to drop this on the fairway. I'm always thinking the negative. And I was a goal kicker as well, which was always bad. If the pressure was on, I was thinking, God, I've got to kick this, or, so I always think, well, if I had that mindset, lots of people have that mindset. I need to encourage the good things in them. And I always found that helps people, feel good about themselves. And if they feel good about themselves, they'll feel good about the team, and they'll work harder because they feel as though they have a coach that, trusts them and likes what they do.
And it builds that confidence in the players, doesn't it?
I think so.
And the last one from this section, you talk about introducing practical tools. What do you mean by practical tools?
It's not quite a tool, more of, I'd change training to suit them. I'd make things convenient for people rather than convenient for me or the organisation. I'd introduce drills that help them, small drills that they might think were a bit childish, that would help them get some confidence in their basic skills. I'd get the analyst, I lost my teeth then, analyst, to cut out some positives from their playing and training sessions, that were all highlights rather than lowlights, and drop them in their inbox or on WhatsApp every so often. And I'd ask them questions on the back of it, so there were positive highlights, and I'd get positive responses in return. So it wasn't so much as a hammer and a screwdriver type of a tool, more of an aid to help them get better and an aid to help them feel better about themselves.
Yeah, good. So I guess like what you want to try and do as a coach is develop a team of happy individuals that are feeling confident about their own abilities. And if you've got those two ingredients, there's a lot more chance of building success from that, rather than having, all this negativity and these are some of the things you're doing wrong and these are where we've got to improve. Would that be right in saying that?
Usually when you're given a new job, it's because things aren't going well. So if things aren't going well, it means the players aren't playing particularly well, and there's more mistakes. And if you go in and highlight that, then all you're doing is, stirring the pot more. And I'm not saying you shy away from it, because the issues can be dealt with, but that's more of a longer term thing. You can challenge them once they start to feel good about themselves and understand your philosophy. I just think that's a key thing, getting people feeling good about themselves before you move forward.
Another thing you talk about is coaching assumptions. Why is it problematic to assume things, and why can the consequences of assuming things be so serious?
Well, I think we're all guilty of assuming things out in our daily lives. I put in that in the post I wrote about, I assumed my wife would put fuel in the car when I went to shopping the other day, and she hadn't, and instead of checking and asking, which I should have done, I ended up nearly running out of petrol on the side of the road. So simple things in life we assume all the time, and there's nothing worse as a coach than assuming things about people. So I'll go back to what I'd said before about active listening and empathizing with people. Get to understand people, and then you won't make mistakes. Because if you assume someone can do something and they obviously can't, then that's going to cause an issue. Or you assume that this player's not good enough because he can't do X, Y, Z, but he probably can if you can help him. Then you're not helping yourself. So it's a generalization. We assume everything. We make decisions based on emotion and feeling as opposed to fact. And one of the things I did learn is go in and understand people first, because if you assume too much, then as I found in Kenya, it can come back and bite you on the backside. Kenya is a great one, because I assumed that everybody's problems were more or less the same around the world, and yet on day one I sat in on a disciplinary for a player who'd been coming late to training, and I asked if I could sit in, even though I wasn't, I was only new in town, and he was late because he'd had an issue with the local witch doctor, and I nearly burst out laughing. I was looking around thinking everybody else must be thinking, don't be so ridiculous, but those things are still prevalent in parts of Africa and in certain tribes, and you assume that everybody has the same values as you. We assume far too much, and you've got to take the time to understand what you're getting yourself into and who you're getting yourself into with.
A lot of your philosophy is about learning about the group that you've got and spending the time getting to know everybody's differences, everybody's quirks, the things that I guess encourage certain people and motivate certain people. And that can be different for the whole group. And we can't just assume, we can't just think that what worked in England or what worked in Australia, when we go into a team in Kenya or Spain or Germany or Samoa, is going to work there. And even to the point that what works with player A is going to work with player B. So there's so many intricacies in terms of developing these relationships and spending the time getting to know the players before you actually even think about learning to pass a ball.
Yeah, there are three key things in coaching that I would say. You have to know your business, know your people and know your purpose. I mean, know your business is, you won't get a job if you can't coach and you don't understand the sport you're coaching, be it rugby league or rugby union. You know your purpose. What are you there for? If you get a job somewhere, what is it? You need to be clear on what it is they want you to achieve, and how quickly they think you're going to do it. But know your people is absolute paramount. My wife says that my biggest strength is my biggest weakness. I care too much. It's cost me jobs because I've gone and fought the players' corner, and it's cost me with, in terms of my relationship with boards of directors or, general managers or whatever. But I still think, I still wouldn't change my approach. I care about people, and because as a young man, I wanted my coaches to care about me, and I had some fabulous teachers that cared about me when I was, in my formative years. So I'm only doing what I thought would have worked for me, and I think I want people, I want to treat people how I'd like to be treated myself. So that's always been my way of approaching things.
It's almost like Ted Lasso, the series is essentially a comedy, but I learned so much about coaching from watching that, because he doesn't know a thing about football or soccer that we call it here, but he goes into that team environment and all he does is show care for the players and just wants to have that authentic environment with the players.
Well, people can see through people, can't they? And particularly sports people. They can spot a phony and a fraud a mile off, I think. So you can only be yourself and have an approach that you think is the best for the team. I think also as a coach, I suppose as a businessman, you've got to be a great salesman. You've got to be able to sell your way of doing things as well. How you put across your ideas. Once you get everybody on board, So I describe myself in my speaking career as an empowerment engineer, and empowering people to be themselves. Part of it is being able to sell a way of doing things, and people will invest in you if they feel that what you've got to offer is worthwhile, and they see value in it. So being able to put that across is really important.
Final question. In your opinion, is it better to live up to expectations or aim to live past them?
I think live past them, don't you? I've had various responses to this from my friends who said, being what people expect you to be is, should be the ultimate. I said, but why? If you achieve what you thought you'd never achieve, shouldn't you have somewhere else to go? And I always feel that we should always try and step on to the next thing. Life's dull if you finally get something you want and then you stop. If you're good enough to, I always say to the players, if you're good enough to win this, imagine what you could do. Let's look at what's next. How can we get better? What's the next step? And I think in our daily life that has to be the case. I just before talking to you this morning, I've just been reading a couple of great articles online, and it's just changed my thoughts on things. And we're all learning. We're all looking to move on to the next thing. I always think, well, I might write another book because I've just seen some stuff that, that's my approach to life. I think we've always got something better to go on to.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it's spot on. I tend to agree. You always want to raise the bar and see what else you can achieve, or what you can get to next. Just because you've climbed the biggest mountain in the world doesn't mean it's the steepest or it's the most dangerous, or it's the coldest or the warmest. So there's always different challenges that you can try to live up to or try to experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Damian, before we go, you just mentioned your book that you just written previously. You've written 4 books, but most recently you published one. Do you want to give us a quick explanation of what that book's about?
It was called "Can You Be Fluent in Success?" It was about my journey, but not so much. And then we won the cup here, and then we went on to there. It was about the lessons I'd learned across that these 30 years, 40 years almost I've been coaching from being a school teacher, and it was about the lessons I'd learned about the importance of self-reflection and self-belief and resilience. Lots of the things that I think resonate with people in all walks of life. It's just my journey as putting it in context, really, how the lessons come across. I'd come home from a trip, and I was sat in a local pub, and one of my friends said, "What's your language skills like now you've lived in 4 continents?" And I said, I'm still struggling to barely speak English. And he laughed and said, "Well, at least you can say you're fluent in success." And, throwaway comment, and we smiled, but I thought, man, wouldn't that be awesome if you could be fluent in success? And that's what sort of got me started and trying to put my thoughts down on paper. And the things that I didn't get into the book, as I said to you earlier, I try and put on LinkedIn every now and again, just a few thoughts on coaching and my view.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to definitely have to try and get the book. If people want to get the book, where can they buy the book?
Oh, it's on Amazon, and there's an audio version. I even narrated an audio version of it. So, if
nice.
You fall asleep, then you listen to that.
I do prefer audiobooks lately. I used to love the actual paper and having it, holding it in my hand, but as I've been busier and busier in life, now when I'm sitting in the car on the way to work, it's the audiobooks. So I really, really love them. So I might make that my next purchase. Well,
I hope it didn't make you swerve off the road.
No. I'm sure it'll be excellent. If it's if what you're putting on LinkedIn are the bits that didn't make the cut for the book, then I'm sure the book's going to be, the next level. So I look forward to reading that. And Damian, before we go, people can find you on LinkedIn. You've also got a website, www.damianmcgrath.com. And are there any other platforms that you're on, or are they the main ones?
I'm just on LinkedIn at the moment. My social media days are over.
Okay. Well, Damian, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I've learned some amazing things. I've loved chatting to you and hearing about some of your experiences going from Samoa to Kenya to Germany, starting off in England. And I just wanted to say thank you, mate, for spending the time with me.
Pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for asking me.
I've learned some interesting things, and I guess I've also had some beliefs reinforced from this conversation with Damian. I love Damian's philosophy that we should be learning from our personal journey in terms of unlocking our potential. Reflecting on our experiences allows us to gain insights that we might have missed in the moment. It helps us to understand what worked, what didn't, and why. This process of reflection and analysis is what turns experience into valuable lessons. When we learn from our experiences, we build resilience. We become better equipped to handle future challenges because we've already navigated similar situations. It's like building a toolkit of strategies and solutions that we can draw upon whenever we need them. Moreover, learning from our experiences fosters continuous improvement. It encourages us to keep evolving, to strive for better, and to never settle for mediocrity. It's a reminder that every setback is an opportunity to learn and grow. Another big one for me was copious coaching or overcoaching. This occurs when coaches provide excessive instructions and feedback, often overwhelming athletes. This can stifle their ability to think independently and to make decisions on the fly, which are crucial skills in any sport. Athletes need the freedom to learn from their mistakes and develop their own game sense. Moreover, overcoaching can lead to increased stress and anxiety. When athletes feel constantly scrutinised and corrected, it can diminish their confidence and enjoyment of the sport. Another key point is that overcoaching can hinder creativity and innovation. Sports are dynamic and unpredictable, and athletes need to be able to adapt and improvise. When coaches dictate every move, it limits the athlete's ability to explore new techniques and strategies. In essence, effective coaching should strike a balance. It should provide guidance and support while also allowing athletes the space to grow, experiment, and learn from their experiences. As discussed, Damian's latest book, Can You Be Fluent in Success, is out and available in both audio and print editions. Damian can also be found on LinkedIn, where he tends to be quite active in his posts on coaching. I will also leave a link to his website in the show notes. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode with Damian McGrath. Please like it, share it with friends and colleagues in the coaching community, and until next time, keep learning.